There's something strange about Colorado, because beneath those snow-capped peaks and winding trails, there lies a darker landscape, one marked by disappearances, unsolved murders, and psycho killers. Welcome to Scary Mysteries, and thanks for tuning in. Here are Colorado's 5 darkest mysteries. Number 5. Colorado's forgotten serial killer.
They bought this house only about 3-4 weeks ago. They're good people, huh? I don't understand what happened.
In January of 1984, something evil crept through the suburban neighborhoods of Aurora and Lakewood in Colorado. It was a serial killer who struck without warning and disappeared just as fast. And for decades, the mystery of who was behind the sadistic late-night attacks remained unsolved. The Bennett family home on Center Drive was just another cookie-cutter house that didn't stand out in any way among the others. Inside, Bruce, Deborah, and their 2 young daughters had gone to bed in their traditionally very safe neighborhood. But outside, they were blissfully unaware that a man was lurking, a monster really, with the worst intentions. Within just a few hours, 3 of the 4 family members would be dead, killed in an unbelievably brutal way. At some point after midnight on January 16th, the killer found that the garage door to their home wasn't locked and just let himself inside. Bruce, who was just 27 years old and a Navy veteran, heard something and confronted the intruder at the top of the stairs. And what followed was chaos. The 2 men clashed and tumbled down the stairwell, smashing the spindles on the way down. But Bruce didn't stand a chance, and the attacker, later identified as Alex Ewing, bludgeoned him with a hammer, and then grabbed a butcher knife from the kitchen and slit his throat. After that, he went upstairs. And there he found 26-year-old Deborah and their daughters, Melissa, who was 7 years old, and Vanessa, who was just 3. And they were utterly terrified, and they had heard what happened to Bruce: the loud fight, the struggle, and ultimately silence. Deborah and Melissa were both assaulted before being murdered with the same hammer. Baby Vanessa was beaten so severely, her jaw, skull, and limbs were shattered, and yet somehow she lived. By morning, she was unconscious, covered in blood and wedged between her bed and the wall. Her entire family gone, and her life forever changed. But the Bennett family weren't the only victims. Just days earlier, 50-year-old Patricia Smith, an interior designer in Lakewood, had been brutally murdered in her home, beaten with a hammer, assaulted, and left for dead on her living room floor. Around that same time, 2 other women in Aurora, Kim Hobbinschild and Donna Holm, were attacked and left for dead. They both survived, though, but the brutality of the assault showed the same cruel, chaotic signature.
It was the middle of the night 2 weeks ago when a man entered this house through the garage. When he left, the man and woman who live here had been beaten on the head with a hammer.
Still, though, in that moment, the authorities weren't connecting the dots. Then, 11 days after the Bennett murders, nearly 800 miles away in Kingman, Arizona, a man named Roy Williams was attacked in his sleep. The weapon this time was a rock, so Alex was switching things up. And Roy luckily survived, and just 3 weeks later in Henderson, Nevada, Chris and Nancy Berry were ambushed in their home by a man wielding an axe. They survived, and police were able to catch Ewing right after this. He was only 22 years old. He would serve time for the Berry attack, but incredibly, no one realized he might be behind the earlier bloodbath in Colorado. The technology just wasn't there yet. And so, for over 3 decades, the Bennett family murders and Patricia Smith's case went unsolved. That all changed in 2018, though. Using advanced DNA testing, investigators re-examined the evidence from the 1984 murder scenes. This time they found their match: Alex Christopher Ewing, who was still behind bars in Nevada. Finally, the true identity of Colorado's Hammer Killer had a real name and a face. It wasn't just any killer. This was a spree predator, a guy who randomly selected his victims and did it all just for the thrill.
This guy isn't, he's not looking to kill at distance. He wants to be involved in the killing and actively involved.
So in 2021, Ewing was convicted of the Bennett family murders. A year later, he was found guilty of killing Patricia Smith and received 4 consecutive life sentences. And Vanessa Bennett, the baby left broken and alone in that bedroom all those years back, had spent much of her life fighting to survive, not just physically, but emotionally. Homelessness, addiction, and the trauma had a grip on her. Still, though, Vanessa never gave up.
I was made fun of in school because my parents were killed. I was made fun of because the hammer man.
By age 30, she decided she'd had enough of being a victim, and got clean and found love, and started speaking publicly about what she endured. And regarding Alex, well, she has just one thing to say about him. He is a coward, and it's hard to argue with her on that. Number 4, the FBI's worst informant.
Kimball is serving 70 years in prison after pleading guilty to 4 murders, his uncle and 3 acquaintances who all disappeared in 2003 and 2004.
Scott Kimball wasn't a ghost in the system. He was the system. Born in Boulder, Colorado in 1966, he was a smooth talker from the start. Not brilliant by any means, but calculated. And more than anything, well, he knew how to lie with confidence.
Are you a con man?
Yes, I am.
Are you good?
I'm in prison, so I'm not that good.
Throughout the 90s and early 2000s, he ran a number of white-collar schemes. Bad checks, fraudulent businesses, fake names, forged documents, you name it. He was in and out of prison, but always managed to wriggle free. It wasn't until 2002, when he landed back behind bars for check fraud, that he stumbled into the role that would make, and later ruin him, confidential informant for the FBI. Here's how it happened. Well, incarcerated Kimball shared a cell with a man named Steve Ennis, who was waiting sentencing for drug trafficking. And Kimball claimed that Ennis was plotting several murders from jail, saying he wanted to kill witnesses in his case. And Kimball saw the opportunity, and he reached out to the FBI offering to testify. And in exchange, he wanted out. The Bureau agreed. He was released very early and assigned to FBI Special Agent Carl Trimbach as confidential human source number 11278. He was now a free man with a badge of credibility, and on top of that, a bureau check in his pocket. But what the FBI didn't realize was that their star informant wasn't going to just be manipulating people anymore. No, he'd be killing them. One of the first people to disappear after Kimball's release was Jennifer Markham, a 25-year-old single mother and former exotic dancer. She was dating Steve Ennis and had plans to visit him in prison. Kimball, ever the con, told her he could help get her into the witness program for protection, and she was last seen in February of 2003 after driving off to meet Kimball, though she never came back. Her car was later found abandoned at Denver International Airport. There was no sign she had flown anywhere, and her remains have never been found. And then came Leanne Emery, a 24-year-old Washington State woman with bipolar disorder and a history of minor criminal charges. And Kimball told her and her father he could help her flee the country and start fresh, promising a role in some supposed covert government operation. He told them he worked with the FBI, and her father even gave Kimball $10,000 to fund it. And that was in March of 2003. The last confirmed sighting of Leanne was with Kimball near Moab, Utah. Years later, her skeletal remains would be discovered in a remote canyon in Grand County, and she had been killed with a single shot to the head.
She took the wrong port, got involved with the wrong people, and she didn't deserve this.
Then there was Casey McLeod, Kimball's own 19-year-old stepdaughter. And Casey was troubled, involved in drugs and petty crime, and she reportedly clashed with Kimball pretty frequently. Now, according to Kimball's later statements, she died of an overdose, but her body has never been found, and her true fate remains a mystery. Because if she did die by ODing and Kimball knew that, well, where was she?
I didn't do anything with Casey. I didn't do anything to Casey.
And the final known victim was Terry Kimball, Scott's own uncle. Scott had convinced Terry to let him help manage his finances and then promptly emptied his account. When Terry started asking questions, well, he vanished. Body wasn't found until years later, buried in a shallow grave near Rifle, Colorado. And so, where was the FBI during all of this? Well, they were still paying him, still trusting him, and still feeding him names of vulnerable people, thinking he was cleaning up the streets. It wasn't until 2004, after Kimball was caught cashing fake checks again, that investigators started asking questions. But even then, the unraveling was slow. It took Scott's own wife, Lori, blowing the whistle to really crack things open. And she grew suspicious after her daughter Casey vanished. And when she found forged power of attorney documents and a gun in the house, she called the authorities.
Actually given her money to take off. I knew Scott was in contact with her, taking her to and from work. I knew that he worked for the FBI.
The investigation picked up steam, and once the lies started to fall apart, they fell fast. By 2006, Kimball was behind bars again, this time for fraud. But by now, law enforcement was starting to piece together the magnitude of what he'd done. In 2009, he cut yet another deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he agreed to lead authorities to his victim's remains. He helped locate Leanne Emery's body. He gave partial info on his uncle's grave, but he never revealed where Jennifer or Casey were. The list of suspected victims doesn't stop at 4. Law enforcement across multiple states believes Kimball may have been involved in as many as 21 other disappearances, many of them people he met through his FBI work. In 2009, Kimball was sentenced to 70 years in federal prison. He's currently incarcerated at the ADX Florence Supermax facility in Colorado. The FBI, meanwhile, conducted an internal investigation. Agent Trimbach was disciplined for mishandling the case, but many critics argue the blame runs far deeper. Number 3, the Black Forest haunting.
For 5 years, the Lees rented homes in the area until they decided this was the place they wanted to set down roots. Strangely, as soon as they made the commitment to stay, paranormal force wanted them out.
Steve Lee was a Louisiana native, a long-haul trucker who had passed through Colorado more times than he could count. And he saw most of the United States many times over, but something about the Black Forest area just north of Colorado Springs always stuck with him. Maybe it was the dark, towering pines or the way the fog rolled in low across the forest floor in the mornings. Whatever it was, Steve knew this was where he wanted to build a life. So in May of 1991, after 4 years of renting around the area, Steve and his wife Beth purchased their dream home, a sturdy log cabin off Swan Road surrounded by 5 secluded acres of forest. And they thought they were settling down. Instead, though, they were stepping into a centuries-old mystery. Because unbeknownst to them, the previous tenant had been convinced the home was haunted, but never spoke up, afraid of sounding crazy and not being able to sell. So the Lees walked on in blind, completely unaware that something weird was happening here, though that wouldn't last too long. And just weeks after moving in, strange things started happening. It began with lights, shimmering bursts that danced across the living room like fireworks, according to Beth. And then came the sounds, footsteps across the roof, chains rattling in the dark, and doors that opened and closed on their own. And their sons began reporting shadowy figures and bizarre flashes of light in their bedrooms. And then there were the noxious chemical smells, untraceable odors that burned their throats and stung their eyes. They could never find the source or even what it was. Now, Steve's first instinct was logical, that someone was messing with them, maybe a local who didn't want them there. He installed a top-of-the-line security system with cameras, motion sensors, and alarms, but that just made things even weirder. Alarms would trip with no one around, and sensors would pick up motion in empty rooms, Over the course of 4 years, the system would alert them to intrusions 62 times. And each time, police would show up, and each time they found nothing. Eventually, the sheriff's department stopped responding. Still convinced the cause was human, not supernatural, Steve turned to private investigators. He poured more cash into surveillance and tech upgrades. That's when the evidence started to point to something otherworldly.
We've basically used all of our savings. We've used the college funds, the whole works, trying to figure this out.
The photos and video footage began capturing bizarre phenomena. Streaks of light, translucent faces, and shadowy animal-like figures that no one had seen in person. The same looking anomalies kept showing up, even with different equipment and different cameras. Reluctantly, the Lees began to consider the unthinkable. But what if this wasn't a break-in problem? And what if something paranormal really was going on? In 1995, they contacted the producers of Sightings, a popular paranormal television series back in the day. The Lees sent in some of their footage, and producers were intrigued, so they sent a crew out to investigate. Alongside the crew came Minneapolis-based psychic and investigator Echo Bodine, and she claimed to sense the presence of a dominant male spirit who believed he still owned the house, along with nearly 20 other entities crowded into the master bedroom.
He's responsible for the things that have happened, and he will continue to be responsible for the things that will continue to happen.
The TV crew experienced a whole bunch of weird things while there. Their thermal imaging cameras picked up unexplained hotspots, right where Bodine said the spirits were standing. And cameras were knocked over, EMF detectors spiked. There was enough there that they returned twice more over the next year and a half. And this time they brought in famed psychic Peter James, and he verified what Bodine had said, though he elaborated and explained something that really grabbed the Lee's attention. He claimed there was an energy vortex in the house, essentially a portal between the physical and spiritual worlds. And that would explain why there were so many spirits there in the first place. Then he asked about one specifically. He wondered, who is Howard? Well, Howard, it turned out, was a close family friend, practically a grandfather to the Lees. Now, Peter had no way of knowing that, and then it got even weirder from there. James said that Howard's son, presumed dead from a drug overdose in the 1960s, was actually murdered, and now his spirit was trying to contact Howard through the house. The Lees confirmed that Howard did in fact lose a son to what had always been labeled an overdose. But could it have been something more sinister? And now in this home, he was trying to tell them. And to this day, the Black Forest home on Swan Road is one of the most heavily documented private hauntings in American history. Photos, videos, EMF readings, witness accounts, police records, and yet no clear answers. Some theorize the flowing groundwater beneath the house, part of the Denver Basin, acts as a natural conductor for spiritual energy. Others say the land, once home to centuries of Native American tribes and bloodshed, still carries the residue of its past. And whatever it is, it never left and is still very much there. Number 2, the truth about Cara Nichols.
October 9th, 2012 is the last time Cara Nichols was seen alive. She left Colorado Springs, heading for a modeling shoot in Denver. She has never been heard from since.
19-year-old Cara had big dreams. She was young and pursuing a modeling career, but like so many others, she fell into the underground world of escorting to make ends meet. In October of 2012, she left her Colorado Springs apartment to meet a client, and that was the last time anyone saw her alive. For nearly 10 years, her disappearance remained just another statistic. A small-town mystery that barely registered beyond the local missing persons registries. And tips led nowhere. Her cell phone went dark. There was no body, no trace, and eventually, no real hope.
The hardest part is to hear investigators say that it's possible she may not be alive, and yet not to have any direct proof or evidence to that effect.
But then came 2022, and out of nowhere, Christina Palmer, the ex-wife of a man named Joel Hollendorfer, came forward and just dropped a bomb. According to her, back in 2014, Joel had admitted something horrifying during a moment of vulnerability. He told her he'd killed an escort 2 years earlier, that he strangled her during their session and didn't mean to. He just held on too tightly to her throat for too long. He panicked after that, and then he buried her on his parents' property just outside the Black Forest of all places. That confession led investigators to a horse's grave, where on top of it, a body had been placed. Under that dirt, they found what had eluded them for nearly a decade, the remains of Cara Nichols.
The El Paso County Sheriff's Office announced a forensic search in Black Forest, brought them to the remains, and they have made an arrest in Nichols' case, but the investigation into what exactly happened that October so many years ago continues.
The coroner's findings were conclusive and verified what they had been told: asphyxiation due to strangulation. And Dr. Leon Kelly, El Paso County's chief medical examiner, was the one who finally gave Cara back her story. He performed her autopsy in February of 2022 and stood in court to explain what he saw. There was far more evidence that drugs were not the cause of death, Kelly told the jury. See, Cara had heroin in her system when she died. As Dr. Kelly explained, that alone wouldn't have killed her. She was a regular user, and her tolerance was high. The amount in her system might have knocked her out, but it likely wouldn't have been fatal, which is why the bruising patterns on her neck mattered so much. Still, the defense argued that Cara may have accidentally overdosed, or that she passed out during her consensual encounter with Joel, and because of the heroin, simply never woke up. So a tragic accident, not a murder. While that certainly could be a possibility, at least one that would give a jury reasonable doubt, except for the fact that Hollendorfer didn't call 911 to get help. He didn't try to revive her. He didn't even leave her body behind. He buried her. So, what's that say about what really happened? If Cara's death was truly accidental, why hide the body? Without the confession from Joel's ex-wife, the physical evidence alone might not have led to a definitive cause of death. But with the context provided, it was clear. This wasn't just a drug overdose, it was homicide. Joel Hollendorfer stood trial for first-degree murder and tampering with a corpse, and in the end, he received a 24-year sentence. And so, what do you think? Is that a fair punishment that fits the crime? Number 1. The fire that stole Maggie Long.
Detectives found high schooler Maggie Long dead after a fire at her family's home near Bailey in December.
December 1st, 2017 was a Friday night in Bailey, Colorado, a small mountain town about an hour southwest of Denver. The air was crisp and the mountains quiet, and then a giant fire broke out. Around 7 p.m., a 911 call came in to the Park County Sheriff's Office with a caller reporting a house fire, but there was more. And people were seen inside the home, causing damage. At least one man was spotted, and something wasn't right. By the time deputies arrived at the Long family residence, the house was already fully engulfed. Once the flames were put out, what firefighters and deputies discovered inside was something no one in the community was prepared for. And hidden in the charred wreckage, they found the remains of 17-year-old Maggie Long. But she hadn't been trapped in there or suffered any smoke inhalation. Maggie had been murdered. What would follow was an investigation that would last years, twist in unexpected ways, and eventually be reclassified as a federal hate crime. So, who was Maggie Long? She was a high school senior at Platte Canyon High, and that night she was managing a school concert and had gone home after classes to change and grab cookies for the audience. She'd be back soon. But when she didn't show up at the event, her older sister Connie knew something was off. Maggie was a very responsible individual and would never skip something like this unless there were extenuating circumstances.
Everything that we had done combined, she just went the extra mile.
Connie drove home to check, but as she neared the property, she saw the emergency vehicles. Her stomach sank. Investigators determined that Maggie had been involved in a violent struggle before her death, and then the house had been deliberately set on fire to torch any evidence of a crime. But before they left, the suspect stole a green safe, several jade figurines, and 2,000 rounds of ammo, a Beretta handgun, and an AK-47 style rifle. A disturbing mix of weapons, cash, and heirlooms. So it looked like a robbery gone wrong, as if Maggie had walked in on it taking place. But it wasn't that simple. And in 2021, nearly 4 years later, the FBI made a stunning announcement. They had reclassified Maggie's case as a hate crime.
Well, the FBI isn't really saying a lot about what we've learned about this, but they are suggesting that Maggie Long's murder might have been motivated by the fact that she was of Asian descent.
Now, the details as to why they did this have not fully been released to the public. But for one thing, Maggie was brutally beaten up. Much more so than, say, someone would if they were just looking to not leave a witness to a robbery. There was extreme aggression. They now think that she didn't walk into people robbing her family's home, but that she was followed and targeted for being Asian American. The FBI's hate crimes unit is involved, and they released composite sketches of 3 men and also revealed 2 vehicles of interest seen in the area. A late 1990s to early 2000s light-colored Chevy Astrovan and a Ford pickup truck. But despite the evidence, the sketches, and even a $75,000 reward, Maggie's killers have never been caught. And Connie remembers her sister as someone who left a lasting impact on everyone she met. When Maggie's friends gather for her birthday each and every year, they talk about their lives, their jobs, their plans, and paths Maggie never got to walk. And this young girl's murder is now one of Colorado's most high-profile cold cases because someone out there knows the truth. And until they come forward, justice for Maggie remains just out of reach. And so that's going to do it for Colorado's Darkest Mysteries. Hope you all enjoyed that. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Check out some of our other videos and podcasts, and stay safe out there. I'll see you soon.